This is Sofjoking for Introdupt and HackingSAP.com, and in this video we're gonna have a look at the application designer in SAP Analytics Cloud. So the application designer was announced in 2018 and is scheduled to be available in 2019, so later this year. So what I'm gonna show you, that's based on a preview tenant, so it's not available on normal customer productive tenants. Well, what is the application designer about? With this tool within SAC, you will be able to build your own interactive applications, like you did that also in Numero Designer or in Design Studio, for example. So it will go a bit further than the options that we have in the story mode of SAC. So you will be able to use additional widgets, for example drop-down boxes, and most importantly you can also use scripts to interact between the widgets on your application. So it's actually a separate object on the platform. So the story, that's an object, but there will also be an application object, and in the version that I have right here, there is no option to move between a story and an application. So there is no interoperability between the two types of objects. So I believe there are plans to introduce a function to go from a story into an application, like a one-time migration that you can do. But at least the version that I have here on the screen does not have that in it. So you have to decide upfront if you want to build a story or an application. So let's have a look at how this application designer looks like and what we can do with it. So it has its own create analytic application menu in here, and if you go to browse, then you can also browse the public folders where you can store these applications, just as you can do with the stories. So of course this is all web-based, it's running in the browser, and on top we have a toolbar which is quite similar to the one that we have for the stories, only it's quite limited. So we have less features here that we can use in application design, at least for now. So there are a couple of views that we can toggle. So we have the viewer on the left side, which shows you the outline of your application with a layout and a submenu for the scripts. In the middle we have the canvas, so that's where we are building the application, and that also corresponds to this canvas item here on the left side. And on the right side we have the builder and the styling menus, just as we have them in the story mode. So when we're going to add some widgets here, for example the chart, into the canvas, then I will be able to use the builder and the styling menu to adjust the way my widgets look like. So here on top we can toggle this sidebar with the outline. We can also toggle the information panel here at the bottom, so this will show us scripting errors and references. So if you want to find objects within your application, you can use the find reference option here on the left side, and the results, they will be displayed in here. In the insert option we have the option to insert our charts, tables and other widgets. So you will see that we miss a couple of them that we have in the stories. For example, we miss the geomaps in here, and we also don't have input controls, but we have a couple of others that we can use. For example, we have a filter line, we have a drop down widget, and we have a button in here, and also these checkbox and radio button groups we can use. So furthermore we have options for chart scaling. We can use conditional formatting in here. What's for example also missing here is linked analysis, so that's not in yet. And then here we have the options to refresh or to show prompts. So let's have a look at what we have to do to build an application with this tool. So let's insert a chart here, and I can drag and drop this chart all around my application canvas. So it's a bit like the canvas that we have in the story mode. It's not a responsive design like we have with the responsive mode. That's also not available in this version. So we have to do it with this canvas, and you just drag and drop to position the widgets. So in the beginning, it's the same as what we can do in the story. So I have to add a widget in here, and I can select my chart type and add measures and dimensions from a data source. So let's add, for example, these two measures in here, and also add a dimension. So this is a data set about car sales for different brands over 2017 and 2018. Well, I can adjust this, like I can also do that in the story mode. Let's pick the top 5 of this and make it a bit bigger, and let's show it with some Higat styling, a bit like this. Alright, so here we have our chart to start off with. And of course we can also use the styling options in here, and we have some additional features in here that we can use. So here we can toggle this context or quick menu option here. So if I disable this, then I won't have the context menu when we run the story. So let's keep that activated, and I also can decide whether to only show sorting, ranking, or filter. Well, let's leave the chart as it is. Go back to the builder menu, and down below here we have an option to enable the Explorer and an additional option to enable creating story from a widget. So when we do this, then we can go into the Explorer mode when we run the application, and there is an additional option where you can jump from the Explorer mode into a new story. So let's have a look at how that works. So let's save this as demo 1. Okay. Let's click on Run Analytical Application. So there we have our chart. We have our Explore button that we just activated. If I click on it, the Explorer opens, and here there's a new option, create a new story. And if I do this, then it will take my chart that I customize in the Explorer mode into a new story, and I can continue from this. So that's actually a nice workflow that they added to the application designer. So let's go back to our application designer. Yep. Let's close this one. And now let's try to add a bit more interactivity. So what we can do, for example, is set up filters to filter this chart. And I can do that in several different ways. So the easiest way to do that is by using the built-in filter line, which is a new component only for app design. And here in this filter line component, I have to select which widget I want to filter with this object. So let's add a dimension in here. Let's add the brand. So I want to be able to filter on brand, and also let's add the color. So if I now save my application, I now have to save the app every time I make a change before I can run it. So there's my filter line on top. I can click on color, and then I get the options to choose my colors. I can also add an additional filter here and only pick the BMWs, and then the chart is also filtered for BMW. So that's still looking a lot like what we can do in the stories. So now let's make our own filter. Let's instead use a drop-down box. So I'm gonna add the drop-down box widget in here. I can drag it, for example, to this place here, and I'm gonna enter a few selection options that I can choose from. So let's pick Volkswagen, BMW, and Audi. And I can also give it a text. So those are my values. By the way, I can also use scripting to fill these drop-down values. I'm not going to do that now, but you can also do this by script. So I now need a script that will execute my filter when I use this drop-down box. So I'm going to use this option here, which is scripting option on this widget, and you can also find it here from the outline on the left side. So I can click also on here, and then I go into the script. So a new tab opens now, and I can quickly switch between the tabs. And here I have room to write my scripts. So what I first need to do is find out what value the user has selected. So to do that, I can introduce a variable, and let's call it for selection. And I can use this to get all the relevant methods for the widget that I'm currently using. I could also use drop down 1. That would give the same result. But let's use this. And if I use the shortcut control space, just as in Design Studio and Lumira Designer, it gives me all the options that I have for this statement. So in this case, I want to see the selection that the user made. So that's the get selected key. And I have to end this with a semicolon. So it will now say, okay, you're introducing a variable, but you're not using it. Well, that's true. So let's also add some script that executes the filter for me. So I want this filter to be executed on the chart that we just made. So we can again use the control space, and when I start typing, it also filters automatically. So there's my chart 1 dot. Now I have to first get the data source that I'm using on this chart. Then another dot, and here I can say, okay, I now want to filter this data source based on the selection that we just made. So I'm going to set the dimension filter in here, and well, the pop-up quickly went away, but it says, okay, you need to have to add 2 values in here. So first you have to name the dimension that you want to put this filter on, and then you have to mention the actual filter value. So again, here I can use control space. I want to filter on merk, which is brand in Dutch, comma, and here I can put in the value that I want to filter on. In this case, that's selection, because we just filled that one with whatever the user selected from the drop-down box. So that's selection. And the statement with the semicolon, and this is the script that we need here. So I'm going to save the app again, and let's see if this works. So let's filter on BMW, for example. And you see the chart only returns data for BMW. Also, my filter line is now showing BMW here. And I can switch to a different brand, Audi or VW, Volkswagen. So my drop-down box filter is functioning as we want it to function. So now a third option to filter a chart within app design is to use the chart itself or a different chart to do this filter. So for this I'm gonna duplicate the chart and introduce another one. Okay, and here I'm not showing the brands, but I want to show the time. So let's pick the months. Yeah, and let's use a line chart in this case. So what I now want to do is that I, for example, click on Audi here in the chart on top, and then that my second chart only shows data for Audi. Well, to do that, we have to add a script on this first chart here. So I'm gonna add the script here. I have two options here for scripting, so I can do this. I can create a script that is being executed when the user clicks somewhere, or the script can be executed when results change in this chart. Well, in this case, we want the clicking of the user to be the trigger, so I'm going to use onSelect. And let's close that tab. So also here I need to start with getting the selected value from the chart. So let's use this dot get selection. And as we are now clicking on the chart, we not only get the value that the user clicks on, but also additional information like the measure that he's clicking on, for example. So because of that, this variable will consist of multiple values. It's an array. So as we only need the value for the brand, we need to make another step in here. Where we only use the second value in this array. So the first value, that's the measure. The second is the selected dimension member. And we have to apply this value on the second chart. So here we're going to set a dimension again, set dimension filter, and we're going to do that for dimension merk, which is the brand, and we are going to use this variable cell brand to fill the dimension value. By the way, not sure why this, oh, now it's gone. Okay, so let's have a look how this works. Let's run it again. So let's click on BMW. And now we see the second chart is being filtered for BMW. If I now unselect this, you will see that I get a script error. So apparently, if I don't have a selection, my script doesn't work anymore. And we can look into the error console in Chrome to see what happens here. So it says, I cannot read property ID of undefined. So apparently, in this script, this statement cannot be executed when we don't have a selected value. So to work around that, we could introduce an if statement so that we only do this whenever there was a selection being made by the user. So we can do that, for example, as follows. So if let's see. So if there are values within this variable, then we have a length that is bigger than 0. Then we can execute this script. If we don't have that, then I just want to remove all the filters that we have set for the mention brand. So I'm gonna get the data source again, and I'm gonna add the feature to remove the dimension filter, and I want to do that for dimension merk, and finish with a semicolon. So let's save and let's try this again. So let's click for Audi this time. Okay, so the data gets filtered now. And if I unselect Audi, then I'm back at the initial state without a filter. So I can also do that for Mercedes-Benz. So it has 130 million, and if I click outside again, it goes back to 1.8 billion. So up until now we are using these local variables. We can also use global variables, which are mentioned here in the outline. And with this we can reuse variables between different widgets. So let's introduce one global variable to showcase that. So let's call them global variable for brand, and it's a string, and I'm gonna fill that with the value that we put in this local variable. So it's gonna be like this. So now we can reuse this value elsewhere in the application. And if we deselect everything, then of course we need this global variable to be empty again, or at least indicate that no selection is made. So let's add all as a value in there. Now let's go back to the chart and adjust this title here. So instead of, actually I want to see here a dynamic text, so I'm going to add the dynamic text coming from this global variable that we just created. So it will give the default value that I put in here. So it has a default value. Done. Save and run the app. So let's filter on BMW, and you can see also the title is now changing, and if I unselect it, it goes back to all. So there we go. So that's it for today. I see you in the next video. Bye bye.